Darul Islam, Darul Kufr is not a reference towards religion. This is a very big misconception which has been in the mind, and which is in the mind in the most of those people who are working on extremistic ideology, and they are becoming terrorists and committing suicidal attacks on non-Muslim lands or committing terroristic activities because they consider this is Darul Harb or Darul Kufr, and they take it as Islam as a religion, Darul Islam, and Kufr as a religion. Imam Abu Hanifa categorically says this term Darul Islam and Darul Kufr does not refer to the deen of Islam, religion of Islam, or religion of Kufr. Islam means peace, he said. And when we say Darul Islam, it means the land of peace. It means just the land of peace, where the people are living peacefully, where their religion, they are getting the freedom of their religion. Their lives, their blood, their property, their business, their freedom, their culture, everything has been guaranteed freedom. So because of this guaranteed freedom and guaranteed protection, al-amn, peace and security. So peace, he says Darul Islam means abode of peace, and it does not mean abode of religion of Islam. Whether the religion of Islam is officially enforced there or not, the Quranic commandments are officially enforced as a system of the government or not. If the people, Muslims and non-Muslims, are living in Aman, they are living in peace and security with all freedoms, that will be known as Darul Islam. And if they are not getting the peaceful life and guaranteed human rights and guaranteed freedom in their religion, their life, their property, their business and their other matters, so by this reason they will be known as Darul Kufr. So then he says that Al-Ahkamu, another quotation, Al-Ahkamu mabniyatun alal amani wal khawfi la alal islami wal kufr. He says that the orders and commandments of Islamic jurisprudence are not based on real difference of Islam and kufr, but these commandments of Islam and differentiation is based on amn and khawf, whether the people are living under a fear of insecurity or they are living under a guarantee and peace and security. So it is related to aman and khawf. And he says that فَكَانَ اِعْتِبَارُ الْأَمَانِ وَالْخَوْفِ أَوْلَى. He says although some of the jurists differentiate this on the basis of religion, they refer to religion, but he says that considering the concept of peace and security, this is the best consideration for Islam. And he says, فَمَا لَمْ تَقِي الْحَاجَ لِلْمُسْلِمِينَ إِلَى الْإِسْتِئْمَانِ بَقِيَ الْأَمْرِ. He said, if Muslims, now coming to our subject here, if the Muslims are living in a land as minority, and the country is ruled by non-Muslims, and the society is a society of non-Muslim majority, as is the case for tonight discussion, non-Muslim countries. He says if the Muslims are living as minority and they are not the rulers and they are not in majority, so they would need to get peace and security. So he says if the constitution, the government, the society, the law, the tradition is providing them peace and security in all their matters, religiously, culturally, socially, politically, economically, if they are getting their rights and getting peace and getting security in all aspects of their life, individually and collectively, he says, then they are living as if they are living in Darul Islam. So the second answer to the same question of today is that the Muslim living as minority in non-Muslim lands, the state of Muslim minority countries, according to Imam Abu Hanifa, this will not be considered as Darul Kufr. What to talk of Darul Harb? Darul Harb is totally out of context to consider these countries Darul Harb, because Darul Harb cannot come into existence without imposition of a regular war, and war between two countries, a regular combat between two countries, which is not happening. So you can say it was Darul Kufr, a non-Muslim land, and he says if a non-Muslim land and a non-Muslim government, and a non-Muslim society, a non-Muslim community, and their law, their constitution is providing you complete peace and security and protection and freedom of your religion, and you are building your mosques there. You are in Australian society, you are living as minority, but at the same time you are getting financial grants and aids for your mosque, for your Islamic centers, for establishing your Islamic schools, and I have heard there are many Islamic schools working here. You are getting aids and grants for your religious schools, for your education, all kind of socio-economic grants as other non-Muslims are getting without any discrimination. So these lands are, according to Islamic law, similar to Darul-Islam. If somebody is still scared to say it's Darul-Islam, then according to Quran, he is supposed to say it's Darus-Salam. I am removing the word alif. If somebody is scared to say Darul-Islam, and I don't insist, so instead of Darul-Islam, these countries are Darus-Salam, the countries, lands of peace and security. And other word would be used Darul-Amn, the abode of peace and security. And this is the highest form. And if we consider the international treaty, Al-Muahada Ad-Dawliya, and UNO has taken place of international Muahada, multinational treaty of peace and security for all countries who are members of UNO, being member of the international community. So every single country who is providing all these human rights and protections to all faiths and dominations and cultures and religions. So through UNO it comes under Darul Ahad. Every single non-Muslim country where Muslims are living as minority, through UNO this kind of Western country becomes Darul Ahad. And according to Islamic law, Hanafi, Shafi'i, Maliki, Jafri and Hanbali, all schools of law, they are unified and they agree to this concept that the laws of Darul Ahad are the same as Darul Islam. So there are two positions for the Muslims living in non-Muslim majority land. The lower level is to consider it Darul Ahad. And for Darul Ahad, the laws are same for the Muslims as if they were living in Darul Islam. And there would be same relationship with the non-Muslim countries, states and governments as their relation were with the non-Muslim minorities of protection and relief. This is the lower level. And the higher level, without considering UNO, for example, itself considering the land, their constitution, the government, their tradition, their democracy, their peace, security, all these rights which are being exercised, taking the case locally. So every single Western country where the Muslims are living and getting all benefits, citizenship and all benefits, as other non-Muslim faiths are getting and the people are getting indiscriminately. So these are Darul Amn and Darul Salam. And Darul Salam, the laws of Darul Salam for the Muslims are the same as the laws for Darul Islam, as if they were living in Darul Islam. And in addition to that, I would say, today, many Muslim countries, in Arab world and non-Arab world, many Muslim countries are, we can see without naming, where the Muslims are living, but they are not getting those freedoms and that kind of peace and security. And they are not enjoying those kind of socio-economic, political rights as they are enjoying in non-Muslim majority lands or Western countries as minority. And they are living as overwhelming majority in Muslim lands. But lot many human rights and freedoms has been curtailed from them. So to me, peaceful Muslim countries, and I would say Australian society is one of the ideal society of this subject. I would declare it as an ideal society and similar to my own society, Canadian. It has its own tradition. So to me, if I have to declare the abode right, I would say the Darul Ahad, it is a lower level. I would go Darul Salam, the abode of peace and security. This society, Australian and Canadian, are the best ideals and examples for the world, where the Muslims as minority are getting the rights and freedoms and securities much, much better than at least you can say 2/3 majority of the Muslim countries in the Muslim world. They are deprived. Here they are getting everything. So this was the one aspect, that the main relationship is neutrality. And because of neutrality, you have to start positively your relationship with the non-Muslim majority, because you start your life from a neutral relationship. And then it entered, because of the constitution had adopted you, all of the citizens, has adopted you as a full-fledged citizen, nationality, and provided you the guarantee of all kind of rights and security. That's why you are the members of Darussalam. So this is the relationship. So because of this relationship, you are compulsorily supposed, and it is mandatory on the Muslims, as minorities living in non-Muslim majority countries, it is mandatory on them to integrate with these countries, in these societies, to really become a part and parcel of the society, to contribute to it, in its social activities, in its political activities, in its cultural activities, along with protection and maintenance of their own cultural, religious identity, linguistic identity, cultural. So the model here would be neither isolation, the relationship of the Muslim with the non-Muslim land, nor assimilation, as if they are not allowed to assimilate, to annihilate, to extinguish their own distinction and identity, cultural, religious or social. They don't do that. In the same way, they are not allowed to live as an isolated model. Just we are Muslims, and we have nothing to do with the non-Muslims. They are non-Muslims. These are non-Muslim countries. Now, this would be a silly aspect to think, totally against Quran and Sunnah and Islamic jurisprudence. You are part and parcel of the country. You are getting salaries, you are working with the country, you are paying the tax, you are getting social economic aids and grants, and you are developing your institution. Every single right is available for the Muslims, as for the non-Muslims. So you have to participate fully in their services, every kind of services. You have to integrate yourself as a full-fledged participatory, active citizen and active part of the society. This is the basic relationship between the Muslim minority living in the non-Muslim lands. And this is known to be the either territory of pledge. When Muslims come here as immigrants, they receive immigration. This is a pledge between an individual and the state. This is a bilateral treaty between an individual, and I'm quoting now third aspect of the same thing. Third aspect or fourth. He is applying for nationality, immigration. So applying for immigration, he abides by certain laws. And he is declaring that I want to become a peaceful citizen of this society. And the state grants him citizenship or stay status or immigration status. So this is a treaty, bilateral treaty between an individual and between a state. So this situation is again similar to Surah Al-Mumtahina, an Islamic law, where a non-Muslim applies to live in an Islamic country of majority Muslim land, and Muslim land provides him the pledge of security. He is known as Musta'min. According to Islamic law, he is known as Musta'min. So, and if he goes there temporarily, he is known as Mu'ahad. A non-Muslim goes in the Muslim majority land, temporarily he is Mu'ahad. If he goes on a visa as a visitor or a temporary stay, he is Mu'ahad. Even if he has become citizen, there is a treaty between that non-Muslim citizen who has applied for the stay in a Muslim land and between the state. That is Al-Ahad. And this Al-Ahad makes him Al-Mu'ahid and Al-Mu'ahad, two sides. In the same way, if a person runs away from a country and that country is at war with the Muslim states, they both countries are at war. So these are Darul Harb with each other, Muharaba. Even if a person belongs to Darul Harb in a state of war, he goes to Muslim land and he is not a combatant, he does not want to fight. He applies for a peaceful stay or living as a refugee or as a citizen. So he is granted a stay. So according to Islamic jurisprudence, he is known as Al-Musta'min. So as a Musta'min, he has a full protection and a full rights in the Islamic society. In the same way, when Muslims come here in non-Muslim land, so they also commit an ahad between, it is an ahad between an individual and a state. And when they are granted the citizenship or nationality, he has become part of this nation. So now being this, he is again achieving the same status of al-muahad, al-mustamin, higher than that. If he got nationality, then they become part of the society and national, one single political community or single nation. So this is the equal position on this side and the same position on the other side. So that's why this is a pledge between an individual and that, and pledge is that he will continue working peacefully in all matters and in all situations for the country. Now, exactly on this topic, we want to trace certain references from historical references and classical from Holy Prophet's time. The first example which we can get, because when Holy Prophet ﷺ migrated to Medina, he became head of the state. The situation changed. So through the alliance with the Jewish tribes, he entered into a multilateral treaty that is known as Al-Wasiqa or As-Sahifa and Misaq of Medina, the Medinan document. Then he was a ruler. Situation was different. We will get some guidance from that document too on this particular subject. But what I can trace directly on this particular subject, where Muslims are living in minority, in a state or in a country where the non-Muslims are majority, the subject of today, I can find the first example of Meccan period. Prophet was stayed there for 13 years after proclamation and announcement of his prophethood, Besa. And then 10 years were spent in Medinan period. So Meccan period consists of 13 years. So in 13 years, when Muslims were living as minority, in non-Muslim majority land, the question of today's night, this was the first position which we can practically apply on Meccan period. So in Meccan period, although there were cruelties from the non-Meccans side, there were brutalities, their behavior was brutal behavior, they were coercive behavior, they were committing militancy, they were committing quite big aggression on them. In spite of all these facts, being a Muslim, non-Muslim citizens, minority citizens of Meccan state, they were not allowed to take up the arms. And Imam Fakhruddin Razi says, Imam Razi, he says, about 70 verses were revealed in that time. 70 verses of Quran were revealed at that time, declaring that they Muslims are not allowed to take up the arms. 70 verses were revealed at that time. Imam Fakhruddin Razi says. This was in order to explain the relationship of Muslims with the state. That's why the commandments and the verses allowing Muslims, permitting them to take up the arms for their self-defense, they were revealed in Medinan period. 2 verses were revealed in Medinan period. One was revealed in the first year of Hijrah. It was أُذِنَ لِلَّذِينَ يُقَاتَلُونَ بِأَنَّهُمْ ظُلِمُوا. Surah Al-Hajj, chapter 22, verse 39. And it was sent. Now since long time, brutality, coercion, aggression has been, they were committing an act of aggression on you and you were wronged. You are being killed, you are being tortured. So now you are allowed, after migration, now you are allowed to take up arms. So you are allowed for armed resistance against aggression. This was the first verse revealed of Surah Al-Hajj in the first year of migration, after immigration from Mecca to Medina, for armed resistance against aggression. It was not any kind of oppression. It was not an aggressive or offensive action. Just resistance, armed resistance against oppression, which was already being committed for a long time. First. Second verse, regarding defensive war, according to you and know, which is known as just war, just warfare. Legal warfare, which is recognized according to the international law accepted by the United Nations Charter. That verse was revealed in 7th year of migration. At the time of Umratul-Qada. It was revealed in Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter 2, verse 190. وَقَاتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ الَّذِينَ يُقَاتِلُونَكُمْ وَلَا تَعْتَدُوا. Now you are allowed to fight in defense, your self-defense, against those الَّذِينَ يُقَاتِلُونَكُمْ, those who have already imposed war of aggression on you. So now it was a permission of war for self-defense, along with the condition, وَلَا تَعْتَدُوا, but don't commit any transgression. You can't transgress the limits. You can't attack on non-combatants. You can't attack on civilian people, those who are non-belligerents. You can't attack them. Just you can attack the combatants only for your self-defense within certain limits, without crossing the limits of laws of just war. So this was done just after migration, 7 years after migration, at the time of Umratul Qada, when the Meccans they breached the peace treaty of Hudaybiyah, which was written down in year 6, when they broke it and it was breached. After the breach of treaty of peace, only then the verses giving permission for war of self-defense were revealed. And in 13 years of Makkah, when the Muslims were living as minority in non-Muslim land, 70 verses were revealed, disallowing them, prohibiting them. But in spite of every kind of aggression and cruelty which is being committed on you, you are not allowed to take up the arms even for self-defense. So Islam and Quran gave a very ideal model of life for the Muslims living in non-Muslim land. There was the act of brutality. What to talk of the present Western world or present non-Muslim land, where no kind of act of brutality is committed on a Muslim as a citizen, unless he himself breaches the peace, breaches the contract through his criminal activity, but that is equal for everybody. So that period gives us a proper light on the conduct of the Muslims living as a minority in non-Muslim majority lands. And 5 verses of jihad were revealed in Meccan period. I would like to make it clear, jihad does not necessarily mean act of fighting. This is totally wrong conception. The word jihad, from all of its roots, linguistic and etymological roots, whether it is jahada or jahada or jahadu, yujahidun, Jahid, Jahidu, or Al-Mujahidun, Al-Mujahideen. 35 verses are revealed in the Quran on the subject of jihad. But not a single verse can be found in whole of Holy Quran, from Al-Fatiha to An-Nas, where Almighty God has combined the subject of jihad and qital. Qital means fighting. Jihad does not mean fighting. Jihad means striving, struggling for good, for the sake of prayer of Almighty Allah. It can be an act of charity. It can be an act of spreading the knowledge. It can be a humanitarian act for helping the poor people. It can be an act of alleviation of poverty. It can be an act of knowledge, spreading the center, National Center for Excellence of Islamic Teaching. It can be imparting the education. It can be the act of awareness. It can be a spiritual purification of your inner self. Any kind of act which may help you to protect you from evil, or which may help the society to protect the society from evil or aggression. So any act of piety and humanity is known as jihad. And including this, if somebody is attacked, then take up the arms according to the law in order to protect your own life, individual or the state, in order for your self-defense, so that an armed resistance or self-defense is also come under the formula of jihad. But that is known as qital. None of the Quranic verses out of 35 verses on jihad contains together the word of jihad and qital. It means, according to Quran, jihad does not necessarily mean act of fighting and act of killing. It is a broad spectrum concept, and qital is just a very minor part of jihad, qital, the fighting, and that is the fighting for self-defense. to protect yourself from the act of aggression. So this was the relationship of the Muslims when they were living in minority, in non-Muslim majority land. But when they shifted here, always the war was imposed on them and they were on the defensive side, not on the offensive side. And coming to this relationship, now I will quote the verses where I have traced all this discussion from Quran. Then I come to the prophetic sunnah. First of all, the Muslims living as minority non-Muslim lands are not allowed to commit any kind of aggressive act or any kind of act of fighting against non-Muslim societies or the government. This is totally against Quran, because Quran has put an impediment and condition in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 190, chapter 2, verse 190 says, وَقَاتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ الَّذِينَ يُقَاتِلُونَهُ. This is the whole of Quran. You can just fight against those who combat you, not your society, not against your government, not against the non-Muslim citizens or the members of the community. No, just this is a combat in a battlefield. Just you can fight against the combatants, not against the society, first thing. And second, the concept where, again, the international law, for example, international law always says, the basic concept given by international law is to always to stop the war. This is the basic concept given by international law. As much as possible to stop the war. This is what international law wants. The basic objectives. To prevent the war in any case. Modern international law, according to UNO Charter, is to ensure that international or interstate disputes are resolved peacefully. This is the objective regarding the war, objective of the UNO international law. Third, if war becomes inevitable, to contain it to bare minimum. Fourthly, to minimize the effects of war, particularly for those who are not belligerents, non-combatants, and are not taking active part in the belligerent activity. Finally, to provide protection to those accidentally affected by war. And sixth, fighting only in defense is allowed and not as an act of aggression. These are the 6 basic objectives of modern international law recognized by UNO Charter. Same conditions have been fixed by Islam and by Quran for the Muslim people, wherever they live, as minority or majority. First thing, they can't take up the arms. How much time? At what time did this start? It is 7:45. No, not that. It was supposed to 1 hour 15 minutes, 1 hour 15 minutes. 1 hour 15 minutes. So how much would be left now? 20 minutes? 15 minutes more. And questions. The second thing Quran says, for example, لا تقاتلوهم عند المسجد الحرام حتى يقاتلوكم فيه. You can't fight with them in the proximity near the Masjid al-Haram unless they combat you. They impose war on you. فَإِنْ قَاتَلُوكُمْ فَاقْتُلُوهُمْ. If they fight, only you can take arms and fight, combat them. So the basic principle in a peaceful society, no Muslim is allowed to take an arm to attack on the society or to commit any kind of act of belligerence. Then next, the act of neutrality which I said, it makes the basic relationship, the relationship of peace. Quran says, فَإِنِ اِعْتَزَلُوكُمْ فَلَمْ يُقَاتِلُوكُمْ وَأَلْقَوْا إِلَيْكُمُ السَّلَامِ فَمَا جَعَلَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ عَلَيْهِمْ سَبِيلًا. An-Nisa verse 90. Quran says, so if they keep away from you, the societies where you are living or where they are living with you, from you and do not fight you and send you a message for peace, it means and provide you a constitution of peace and security, provide you a situation, an atmosphere of peace and security. Allah has left no way open for you to launch any kind of act of aggression against their society. If they provide you with peace, this is Quran.
You have mistranslated that always by a verse. Can you
This is not, you can put your question afterwards. You can put your question afterwards. This is not mistranslation.